My name is Diamond Blanco, and this is Tea Time Creation for British Literature 2 with Dr. Tabitha Miller. And if you see my eyes wandering anywhere, it's because I'm looking at my notes I have written here and also probably reading a quote off the screen. So, the two readings that I chose to do were from The Picture of Dorian Gray and also The Interesting Life of Olato Equiano. My literary theory that I tend to lean toward most of the time when I'm reading is the post-structuralism or deconstruction. And this literary theory has to do with words having different meanings, and also meaning that the work of literature has no coherent meaning at the center of it, and there's no right or wrong interpretation of the work or the passage. And so there's so many variety of things that you can get from the passage, maybe more than one, when you're reading something. And that's what I tend to do when I read a passage. I get multiple meanings out of it. And so I like to think of events or characters to back up the theme when I'm reading a book, which helps me to foreshadow and makes it more interesting when I'm able to read and understand a book. And so today I'll be analyzing the main characters' perspectives and their actions, and how these can be viewed differently by different people. And I'll first share my own thoughts on the story and then indulge into the scholarly articles interpretation and how those authors interpreted the passage as well. So, for The Interesting Life of Olato Equiano, I chose the scholarly article called Olato Equiano, Accidental Tourist, and this was written by Geraldine Murphy. And so I interpreted The Interesting Life of Olato Equiano as a narrative of a story that defies the odds against slavery and slaves, and it sheds light on how some slaves were not brutally attacked all the time or mistreated, and some actually had the opportunity to seize and take hold of power and gain a sense of understanding and knowledge while they were enslaved. And I could definitely clearly see that from Olato Equiano. And so Murphy starts out by explaining us what happens. And so here we have Olato Equiano, who is kidnapped at the age of 11 from his home in Benin, which is now Nigeria. And he is sent from owner to owner, traveling the world, across land, across sea, and he just gets to experience a whole lot of cultures during his lifetime. And Murphy uses the word travel to explain how Equiano grows up observing Europe, just how Europeans observe Africa. And then he moves on to France, Denmark, West Indies. He purchases his own freedom, and then he continues to travel around the world even more. And so Equiano learns to read, write, and even buys his own freedom. And according to Murphy, he gained his freedom by accumulating capital through his trading ventures among the islands and the southern coast, end quote. Murphy is fascinated by the combination of the slave narrative and the travelogue. And so Equiano incorporates much more than being a slave into his book. According to Murphy, quote, "Many slave narratives are transcultural or hybrid, written within and against the terms of dominant culture, and Equiano's is no exception," end quote. Murphy marvels at the fact that Equiano is full of knowledge which stems from his extensive travels. And so here we have a scholarly article, a critical essay that focuses on Equiano's travel, whereas I focus on the slavery part and seeing how his narrative is much different from a painful and excruciating life of most of the narrative of slaves that we read today. And here Murphy takes a whole different route on his article and focuses on the traveling aspect of it, and how Equiano had this opportunity to travel the world and gain so much knowledge because he got to interact with people, learn different languages. Here is a whole slave, and he's writing this whole narrative that has been all around the world now, past his time. And so we move on to the critical essay on The Picture of Dorian Gray, written by Brian Aubrey. And my interpretation on The Picture of Dorian Gray revolved around the concept of true beauty, or being true to oneself. And Throughout the passage, I'm reminded to follow my heart and not others, and also to enjoy youth as well as aging before it's too late to appreciate it. And so Brian Aubrey focuses on the fact that the picture of Dorian Gray depicts three main characters with defined traits and characteristics, yet they never seem to, quote unquote, embody their actual persona that the author gives them. More specifically, we take a look at Lord Henry. Now, Lord Henry we can think of him as a mentor to Dorian Gray. And since Dorian Gray he doesn't grow up with a mother or father, he leans towards Lord Henry's guidance. And so Aubrey explains how Lord Henry is always giving advice that he would never take himself. And he takes a step further to say that, quote unquote, art shields people from the harshness of actual existence to provide a reason for Lord Henry's behavior. So Lord Henry is full of paradoxes and empty promises that sound so appealing, but have no substance to Dorian's benefit, to Dorian's life. So Lord Henry influences Dorian with paradoxes so much until Dorian is obsessed with his youth and beauty and never gets to experience reality for himself. Dorian Gray is so caught up in his looks that he's just so big-headed and doesn't get to experience life to its fullest. He doesn't have feelings, like normal human feelings. It's just all, you can say, intrinsic. And so when Dorian is actually ready to experience life more abundantly, he's defeated by his guilty conscience that has hid his sins for so long on a painted canvas. And there we get the picture of Dorian Gray. And so Aubrey concludes by stating that Henry's obliviousness to Dorian's character only demonstrates that Lord Henry sees nothing wrong with his doings as well. And that he also concludes by saying that art is beautiful, but it doesn't guide through human experiences. And so here we see how my interpretation of the picture of Dorian Gray and Brian Aubrey's interpretation kind of do go hand in hand, but Brian has his own conclusions as well, different than mine. And so I think that goes back to my literary theory that I chose, which was deconstruction, seeing that works can have multiple meanings by different people, and there's not one set of interpretation, because I went through life differently than Brian Aubrey as well as Gingerline Murphy, and so our interpretations could be totally different. And it's not to go to say that one is wrong, one is right. It's just different, and that's how we view it. Thanks for watching. Thank you. Bye.